Hi guys, if you couldn't tell, today I'm going to be talking about this new event that I think a couple people, or a majority of you guys, maybe have heard about, but I wanted to break down exactly just how insane this event is, and I hope that Smilegate continues to provide this in the future. The first thing we have to talk about is that for the entire duration of this event, what you'll be granted access to is not only the carrot event or this carrot exchange, but also 200 free energy alongside 10 quick battling attempts per day. Now, before we even break this down, I do want to mention that there are differences between current and returning / new players that are participating in this event, and that's usually things like prices in the shop and redeemable rewards, depending on what, I guess, background or what state of position you're in on your account. Now, to be clear, if you are a returning player, you receive a pretty decent and sizable buff in terms of discount. However, in terms of being a new player, there are massive discounts for everything in this activity. Now, again, there isn't any specific consistent percentage, unfortunately, but generally speaking, there's a very big advantage or incentive for new players to farm or participate in this event. Now, to break down the systems really quick, as you see here, there are two different carrots as the currencies that you could obviously see on screen, and you could buy anything from the store, ranging from things like energy, ranging from things like Molagora, charms, and even a few pieces of gear, which depending on where you are in the game can be good or bad. However, let's actually break down the currencies and how you get them. Now, for these normal carrots, which you'll have an abundance of, there is a 25% chance to receive them when you clear the following content. That's the hunt, which I guess, you know, most of you guys are already familiar with. But in addition to that, you also receive it from Rift, the Ogre's Armory, which you can only technically do 10 times a day unless you spend Skystones, the Spirit Altar, Adventure, Side Story, although you can't obtain it in story stages. And to be clear as well, you can't just run a stage that quote unquote doesn't cost energy and then spam this to somehow bypass or break the system. Now, to be clear regarding this, regarding the system itself, if the energy exceeds 10, the chance to increase or the chance to get a carrot increases by 2.5% for every 1 energy after 10. And as a result, for hunt, since hunt is 20, it does mean that you have a 35% chance per hunt in order to receive the carrots. Now, in terms of the golden carrots, the thing about this specifically is that for the golden carrots, you have a 5% chance to receive a golden carrot after clearing the same content as, well, the normal carrots. However, the difference here is that for hunts, given that there is of course an increase and the hunt has the highest or the 20 energy cost in this case, instead of being a 35% chance to receive a normal carrot, for the special carrots you have a 10% chance to receive them per hunt. Now, in terms of the rewards as well, you can kind of see what we have access to at the moment, but to break it down and to kind of give you an evaluation of what's worth it or not worth it, plain and simple, pretty much everything here is worth it if you are someone that's in the mid to late game. Now, unfortunately, you could argue that things like maybe the sword here or maybe the helmet are a bit less worth it as they are level 78, but I do want to make a caveat and kind of give a bit more context to these, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now, in terms of this, being able to receive a Hero Covenant selector is amazing. Having access to the artifact selector is also pretty fantastic in terms of value. But then if we move to the less golden carrot focused items, the rare catalysts, the lesser accessory charms, and just the catalysts in general feel very worthwhile just because of, well, in general, you need a lot of resources to upgrade characters, though I will say, given the changes to adventure, you could argue that maybe the adventures or these catalysts specifically are things that you would hold off on. However, I do think that the charms and the Molagora, regardless of where you are in the game, is very good. Now, to move back for a second, the next topic that I want to talk about is these refresh or these reversion mana stones. Now, from what I understand, a few of these are actually not purchasable. I believe this is for week 3. Not specifically talking about these, but I think later on, as you'll see in week 3, I think these two specifically are only locked behind or not available for new players, which is fine. However, in terms of these stones, to be blunt, these stones are 100% gambling mechanics. They're gambling tokens, and if it is something where you feel that you purchase these, you reroll something, and your piece of gear feels or ends up, I guess, with a worse result, it's going to always feel bad. Now, that said, if you are someone that wants to use these because the piece that you're re-rolling on otherwise has no possible future, then by all means do this. However, I would still definitely prioritize getting the selector tickets first, followed by other things, I'd guess, like perhaps something like the sword or the helmet. But I do want to make a brief distinction about the sword versus helmet. Now, given that this is a protection set piece, you may read, or you can read here with the protection set, that at the start of battle, you grant a barrier equivalent to 12% of the caster's max HP to all allies for 2 turns. Now, given that this is a helmet, that means that, well, it gives you a bunch of flat HP. However, because this is a 78 piece, the actual amount of flat HP that you provide at base just for upgrading a piece to level 15 or to plus 15, regardless of how much, regardless of how the subsets roll, mean that in general, just buying this piece will always kind of put you on a, I guess, a less, or will always give you less stat by comparison if you were to then upgrade an 85 or even a 90 or, you know, an 85 basically piece of piece of gear instead. This is also the case for 78 gear, or rather for 88 gear if you're curious, but the same can't really be said, or the same negative value that you may associate with the helmet having less health is not actually something that you can as readily feel with a sword, given the fact that most protection set characters do not care for the flat attack on their weapon. In that sense, if you're debating between, or if you're stuck between picking for the helmet or the sword, there is technically an argument for you to, in theory, gain more value out of the sword. However, it is also equally viable to argue that, well, for protection sets and just for having health in general, you're going to want both pieces just to complete the set. Now, moving past this, of course, there are other rewards like the random chest, but important to remember here as well is that you do have access to the energy that is unlimited, as opposed to the aforementioned limited 10 out of 10 or some of these 1 out of 1 activities or 1 purchases. But moving along, we also have a few items here in week 2 that I wanted to go over specifically. So, actually, apologies, because I did forget to mention one thing about week 1. If you are a returnee or new player, there will actually be 2, if I'm not mistaken, of these tickets that are available as opposed to 1. And there's also a missing elemental summon here, or 5 elemental summons, of the fire, water, and earth variety, but that's also only for new players. And of course, as I'm not a new player, you don't have access to this, or access to this. Now, moving along, in terms of the epic and catalyst boxes, you would also be interested to know that there's actually a decrease in this for new players. For new players, there's only 8 and 15 of these, which I guess is fine, but seems a little bit odd, as you'd maybe imagine that new players are the ones that need this the most. But in terms of the rare catalyst rewards here as well, or the catalyst chance, you can see that there's actually a variety of different rewards accessible here, and it would feel good in theory if you maybe got something like the greater modification gem selection chest. But I'm not honestly super thrilled about this, just because, again, there's no guarantee that what you reroll in terms of your mod stats will actually increase. Going forward from this, we have week 2, and a lot of the week 2 rewards are fantastic as well. You have the 5-star elemental tickets. You've got gear that is fine. It's still 33 equipment score at 34 at base, but this gear in particular is more slated for the healers, which could make sense as they obviously tied the Victorica and Crow characters attached or alongside this alongside this patch. Now, in addition to this, you may also be interested to know that in some cases, the protection set speed main stat boot may lose a little bit of value here, not only because it has effectiveness, but also because there are a couple of protection set characters that prefer boot, or their boot main stat, to be HP as opposed to defense. This is also technically the case for the chest, where you may, or I should say, the helmet losing a little bit of value here, apologies, is also something that you will see here with the chest, as you do technically lose a bit of defense. But aside from the usual spiel that I mentioned about this, you do also have access to other rewards like a bottle of knowledge, which you you can use to limit break an artifact to an additional rank or level. But moving along, we also have things like charms, the random charm chance chest that we mentioned before, with, if I'm not mistaken, generally speaking, similar to or the exact same changes. But something that you'll notice that is missing here is the energy and a couple of the other rewards that I mentioned in week 1. Now, first and foremost, you should, or it is worth mentioning here, that in terms of the greater accessory and equipment charms here, once again, for new players, this is reduced to 15 and 8, 15 being for the equipment and 8 for the accessory charms. Again, a bit weird. However, I guess they'll have less currency in general. But in terms of this reward as well, this reforged material selection chest, if I'm not mistaken, you will also have access to a different amount here. I'm not entirely sure what this amount changes to. I was told that this was originally 4. However, as you can see on screen right now, for myself, I'm also in possession of 4. But moving along, the next thing we can talk about is week 3. Again, now all these pieces already fine, probably something that you'd use on somewhat of a DPS character, maybe a Ludwig, or you could use this potentially on a DPS that you're using to clear content, like a Watcher Shuri or even a Strays, as triple torrent is very popular and very helpful. But moving from this, you also have 2 immunity pieces, which are fine, especially if they roll speed or one specific stat for any tank or soul weaver that you're looking for. But in addition to this, you should know that in week 3, as I mentioned earlier, you actually don't have access to, again, these 2 stones if you're a new player. However, there's also something that's missing here in the form of not a Molagora, but 5 light and dark elemental summons here too. And that's because that is restricted only for new players. Now, in terms of the Molagoras that you see here, although there's 5 that are slated here, according to new players' accounts, there's actually 10 that are available here. Then for bookmarks, there will also, or rather I should say, there's an addition of 50 bookmarks that'll otherwise be increased or added to this list, but you don't see them right now because, of course, I'm not a new player. And these lesser these lesser charms, if I'm not mistaken, are actually not available for new players for whatever reason. Now, again, in terms of the box, you do have pretty similar, if not the exact, or if I'm not mistaken, a relatively similar looking list of, I guess, rewards. Noticeably here, I do believe that there's actually a change where in week 3, yeah, that's what it is. In week 3, they had a change in terms of these bottom rewards, where instead of it being Molagoras, in week 3, there's actually week 2's rewards being charms. But now finally, for the week 4, the noticeable changes are the 85 plus 15 HP set, which is obviously not present here. But in addition to that, they also, or new players also, have access to 50 lesser equipment charms, 35 lesser accessory charms, and they also lose out on a couple things, like they don't have the purple reminder stone, which I guess is missing from my list as well. I apologize. I had just gone over and looked at 2 different account states. Again, the rewards are quite different. I apologize for that because things change back and forth. However, in general, you'll see that these rewards are obviously a little bit better, but they're more focused on summons and upgrading and imprints as well, which is fine given that this is a long 4-week event. Now, based on what we're seeing right now, I do want to mention specifically when it comes to the carrot event, that this current period, this 1-week period where we have access to the first week of carrot exchange, is quite important, as technically speaking, if you decide to spend energy to farm out this event, but also for the sake of this energy here, you technically could gain an additional 360 energy per 30 runs, just based on simple math and calculations done across 30 runs. However, because this isn't something that you'll get in weeks 2 or 3, unless if there's a change, in which case I'll update and pin this comment, or pin a comment into the comment section, now would be the time to farm out energy to make use of this, specifically if you want a bit of a return on your energy. But otherwise, guys, that's the entire carrot exchange. This is an extremely, honestly, generous event, and just because of the way that the rewards are slated And because of the abundance of resources that were being given overall, I'm actually quite happy with the overall state of this specific, I guess, like energy back event. So if you haven't already, I definitely encourage you to start working on or progressing through this carrot exchange. And even though I'm quite far ahead, or quite behind rather, you shouldn't be, and you should definitely take advantage of this if possible. Anyways though, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.